So before the video starts, I wanted to announce that we're having our 10-year anniversary. It's 10 years of doing RBG and you guys supporting us for all those years. So we're gonna have a big blowout meetup at Turkey Bay. So if you're interested in coming, you can go to rbgcarts.com/events. You can find out the information, and Turkey Bay is an amazing place to ride. If you have a yard cart with no suspension, a mini bike with no suspension, all the way up to a Jeep, you can come and ride with us. You can take a minivan through there if you want to. But it's a great time. They have camping there on site. You can tent camp or camp in a camper. You do have to have a generator. They don't have power hookups. There is some cabins down the road that you can rent, but they do sell out super fast. So if you're interested in coming and wanting to use a cabin, you might want to do that now to go ahead and book your spot. Even if you don't have something to ride, we would love to see you out there. We have people every year come that don't have anything to ride. They just hang out with us. And Scott, the Deuce man, is going to have a centipede there, and he'll be giving rides because he'll have up to 4 extra seats. So if you don't have nothing to ride, there's a good chance you can get rode on something. But we'd love to see you out there. We're giving away a ton of stuff. Make sure before the event, if you're planning on coming, to check Turkey Bay's website. We've had times where a big rainstorm or something comes and they'll cancel last minute. So we're going to be updating you guys. So make sure to follow us on social media to stay up to date with everything that's going on. But make sure to check it out. We'd love to see you out there. We're going to have a lot of people out there like EC Carburetors, if they can come, and Small Engine Warehouse, and giving away a lot of stuff. And we just want to spend our time with you, hang out by the fire, ride some, and just fellowship. Thank you guys for supporting us for all these years. We hope to see you at our 10-year event at Turkey Bay. On today's video, we're going to be taking the 670cc V-twin Predator engine from Harbor Freight and turning it into a high horsepower, high torque monster. To do this, we'll be installing a set of billet rods with insert bearings, and this is going to protect this engine and give it some longevity. We have a set of heavy valve springs to support our new camshaft, chromoly push rods for valve train strength. We got a 507 camshaft that should make massive torque down low in the RPMs, a billet flywheel for safety, and a hand port matched intake manifold, and a milled and ported O-ringed head from Beckwith Performance. I've linked all the parts in the video's description, including the information for Beckwith Performance if you want to get an engine built. The last piece of this puzzle is a 34mm flat slide Mikuni. First, I need to disassemble the engine by taking off the throttle and choke linkages, starter box, voltage regulator, and the air box. Now I'll go on to remove the flywheel cover, fuel pump, carburetor, and intake manifold. Now I can get into the crankcase and remove all the internals. Make sure to keep the spacers on the crank and the cam for reassembly. I'm going to tap the oil sensor hole as well as the governor hole on the block. We need to check all the oil clearances for the new rods. We are rod inspect at 1.572, so we're good to proceed. I'm going to reuse the factory pistons so I can pull the stock rods from the piston and install the new billet rods. Make sure you orientate the rods with the piston the same way they came out of the block. One side of the rod will have a flat surface. These flat sides will be the sides of the rod that face each other. When I install the rod bearings, line up the notch on the bearing with the notch on the rod and the cap and press it in. Make sure the piston rings are orientated 120 degrees apart and your orientation of your rods are correct when installing them inside the block. You can see that the piston on the left has an arrow pointing up. And the piston on the right has the arrow pointing down. Now during the building of this 670, I did run into an issue once I torqued down both rods. Now the oil clearance was good on both rod bearings, but I would torque the outer rod and it would lock up. I could not move the crankshaft. Now I've never had this issue with one of these engines, or any engine really. So I knew it either had to be a bad rod bearing or something was going on. So what I ended up doing was pulling the rods, and I have a good friend that builds a lot of 670s named Andy. He has a business where you can get like heads poured, you can get all stuff, tons of stuff done, and 670s built from him. I'll link that in the video description. But I called him about the issue because once I pulled the rod caps on both engines, the rod bearing, it was almost as if, and I didn't get any pictures or nothing, I just fixed the problem and moved forward. But basically what the issue was where they bent the tang in the rod bearing, it kind of mushroomed out the side of the rod bearing. And when you put it in the rod cap, the rod wasn't an issue, just the rod cap on both rods. Once you installed it, the tang wouldn't let the tang groove cut in the rod cap, wouldn't let the bearing move over enough. So you had exposed bearings sticking out of the rod on just the top corner on the opposite side of the tang. So what that did was it put that extra piece of bearing was sticking towards each other, and when you torque down the rods, it was pressing and locking up the entire engine. So I had to take it on the belt sander and hit the tang area on the side of the bearing, and then I had to file it to retaper it, and now we have it moving perfectly fine. So we got that fixed. So if you're buying, I'm going to call Performance 670 about this issue, let them know about it, and hopefully get a new set of rods to be able to make a video addressing this, just in case you got a set. Surely he'll fix it on new sets, but just in case you got an old set, that's the deal. So let's proceed on and putting this thing together. We can now install the lifters in our new cam into the block, making sure the dots on the cam gear as well as the crankshaft gear is lined up. Make sure if you're using the stock side cover gasket that you reuse the factory shims on the cam and the crankshaft. If you're using gray RTV, you need to use the shims linked in the video's description. Now we need to remove the governor gear from the side cover by separating the small clip holding it onto the shaft. Make sure to grab the washer riding behind this gear as well. Now I can install the side cover and torque it to 22 foot-pounds. I need to install the new valve springs in the ported and milled heads. I will also be blocking off this port that used to be used for the fuel pump. I can now install the copper O-ring in the head to make it have an even stronger seal on the head gasket. Install the new head gaskets, head dowels, and install the heads on the block. The 670cc heads can be used on either side of the block depending on what side you want your exhaust to exit on. Make sure if you're using the factory intake manifold that these intake ports point towards the flywheel side of the engine. So we got the 40 thousandths push rods we needed. Now we can go ahead and dress out the heads, get our valve covers on, put all of our heat shields, and then we're letting the flywheel get cold in the freezer to get the ring gear off. So let's get this thing dressed out.
With the valve lash set, we can install the valve covers and the heat shields. Remove the flywheel key to lap the new flywheel on the crankshaft with valve grinding compound. I placed the stock flywheel in the freezer to remove the starter ring gear. Now I can tap it off with a hammer. Now with the cold billet flywheel and the heated ring gear, it'll slide right onto the new flywheel easily. With the valve grinding compound cleaned off the crankshaft, we can install the flywheel key and our billet flywheel and torque it to spec. I use a homemade crankshaft stop so I can torque the flywheel.
So unfortunately, I forgot that to put the starter in, you kind of have to have the flywheel off, because you can see where it's so tall, it's hard to get in there. The biggest problem is this shield right here. Like if this shield wasn't here, I'd be able to do it, but the only problem is it bolts up behind the flywheel. And we also have to put this sandwich block that goes on there like so to hold the alternator, because this is getting a 70 amp alternator kit. So unfortunately, son of a biscuit eating bullfrog, we got to pull the flywheel, pull this little heat shield, bolt this on, put the heat shield back, then the flywheel.
With that problem addressed, I can now install the coil and set the lash and install the flywheel cover. Make sure to run a bolt from the bottom side of this hole if you're using an aftermarket carb. Now we can get the carb installed, the alternator kit, and fill it with Amsoil break-in oil, and now we're ready for our first startup.
spray a little bit starting fluid. Now she might. Real good. And he wanted baffles because some state parks and things you ride at makes you have baffles, but I think it sounds good with or without. Like it's quiet enough with it. Just a little side note, if you're ever breaking an engine, that's not the proper way to do it. Like you're supposed to start an engine and immediately go under load and start pulling heels. Keep it at about 60% throttle for about 30 minutes if you can. So it's not, a lot of people don't have the room to do that. But free revving engine doesn't do anything. What you're trying to do mainly with the break-in cycle is seat the rings. So get the rings seated in the piston and everything, and then that's when you do your oil change. And break-in oil has high zinc and stuff in it that helps those bearings break in properly and not prematurely wear. We use high zinc assembly lube from Amsoil on everything when we build it, so it's very well lubed. So what we'll do is on the next video, when we actually ride this buggy, we've got to look over everything, make sure everything's good. Then we're going to go pull the heels, ride around the field some, go in the woods, and not just bang it off the rev limit or anything. Not that it has a rev limiter actually, but, and then we'll pull it back in and we'll change the oil and put probably 1030 Amsoil Dominator racing oil. That still has good amounts of zinc and stuff that's gonna keep allowing your engine to break in right, but break-in oil does not have friction modifiers. So you're actually going to make more horsepower when you switch over to like Dominator racing oil. We've learned so much doing this stuff, and it's cool to have Amsoil on our side and great performance company. So if you want to build one of these V-twins just like this, make sure to check out the links in the video's description. 670s make great power. They're very reliable engines. They're one of the top 5 V-twins to build for a buggy. So we'll see you on the next one. Make sure to check out those links, support the companies that support your boy, and we'll be riding this in a day or so. We love you and God bless.